Did that get recorded?
Say that again.
The time is 9:25 and we are now in closed session. Okay. Hi.
Should we pick up where we left off?
Where did we leave off
with
with
Michael?
Michael?
We did. Michael, we left off with you.
Yep, and by the way, Mayor McCook was in the back.
Thank you.
So I think me connecting dots across, I think that it is highly likely that there is some involvement underhandedly with the TTO. And I hate to be a conspiracist about this, but I don't think Bridge has been up and up at all, because they led this board down the path that yes, 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 go, go, go. And then only 2 weeks ago was like, or like not even that, a week ago, was like, stop. And then we're pulling out, and then now we want to be back in 24 hours later. And the Willow Springs has like constantly been out there against this board before anything has even happened. And now Bridge telling Willow Springs that we've been in talks since March at least, is to me backhanded. And I think that there's a lot more going on behind all of this than an up and up deal with Lyons Township.
I would say, for you, when I was totally put off by the fact that Bridge disclosed what we had in our private session, and you had asked in that session, I think, about just to confirm this is all confidential, and then they, oh my God, totally, and then
So we know.
they waived all that confidentiality, I think.
Do we have actual, it's hard for me to kind of figure out that was a lot of information presented, which very interesting and helpful. I'm just gonna throw out what's on my mind. And I'm used to commercial real estate negotiations, not with the school and dealings, but every single property we ever sold in my last company or one that we bought had $1 million back and forth with mostly the PSA, the purchase and sale agreement. So I'm not surprised that they almost can't accept. I don't exactly remember what's all in our terms and conditions, and I know that our initial reaction was that it's very buyer friendly, but that did not surprise me at all that they'd want to make changes.
Sure.
And I think whether it was Bridge or Prologis or UPS or anybody, they have to go through their legal process internally and come with changes. So I'm not trying to discredit what you've raised. I think to me it feels like, and I'm not quite, I think I'm missing part of your ultimate point, but if part of it is that Bridge from the beginning was not in good faith. Market conditions for industrial REITs when they came and talked to us were top. Industrial REITs as a sector were down 28% in calendar 2022, and I don't know at what point it changed. The cost of borrowing went sky high throughout the year. I'm part of me was surprised they still showed up to bid, because I know we lowered the price, I'd say modestly so they had come in March with $65 million, thinking we owned the whole thing. I think Eris or someone was doing math like that based on our ownership percentage would have been 58. We set it at 55. They're at 55. I was surprised they could stay at 55 because just what we would call return hurdles are so much higher to do a project. You're going to pay more in interest expense to get a mortgage or to get a loan to buy the property. So. Were you saying that from the beginning there was a plan, that they were, or something more recent?
There could be.
And I totally agree. The Gettys are in every business, and the what's the other guy? The Cars seem to be in 2 municipalities, and Steve Landick. Were we in this meeting or somewhere else? Just somewhere I just had heard, or maybe I was on the TTO website. The TTO's newest customer is his town.
Yeah, Bridge.
So, but I think involving a professional company that's backed by institutional investors throughout the country called Bridge, and again, I'm not trying to defend them, I don't know. I don't think they have time to deal with small town politics.
Okay, well, that's your opinion.
Yeah, no, it is.
I just share that with you. You all can take it how you want to. I know how I feel and where I'm going with it, so you all can take it how you want. And if something blows up, then don't say I didn't tell you.
But what can they do to hurt the school
Something
board?
legal, we can get into some kind of legal,
They're baiting us, maybe, is what I think.
yeah, depending on however terms and conditions change, they could get us somehow legally.
Okay.
And then we can end up in another lawsuit.
But does it even make sense? Here's maybe the part, and help me. I'm sometimes slow in coming up the curve here. If they've got Willows, as part of what you're saying, they've got Willow Springs in their back pocket, or under
They
their
just did a deal
influence.
with McCook.
So why would, like, after all the complaining and negative, don't do the sale tonight that we heard, how does that align with, like, wouldn't they?
I don't know what Willow Springs' goal is. Willow Springs should be dealing with Bridge and not dealing with us
Oh yeah,
in the
but
public.
but
So maybe we should be
reputationally-
asking, why is Willow Springs doing what they're doing?
Well, I thought it was what I was going to ask, and I was hoping, Eris, you might have something, because that
Like-
was so bonkers to me.
Yeah.
I didn't.
well, they're
I-
going
I-
to make
what
us
was
the
the
bad
bad
guy.
Have them all
But
vote.
the Willow
Before they-
Springs stood up
They
there.
don't want that decision.
Well, I know they don't want it,
But that's the whole reason.
yeah.
If we are the bad guy, then
Yeah.
they don't have to.
They
They
don't
don't
have
have
to
to
do
do
But
it.
you don't know
Yes.
that.
I think it's important
You're
for
just
you to,
assuming.
real quickly, like Eris, explain, talk to the board about the zoning process and the legality of that. I mean, you kind of addressed that in open session
Right, I
tonight.
mean, so let's say the board was approving the terms and condition with Bridge tonight. So putting aside what they do in terms of like physically evaluating the property, they'd start sitting down with the planners at the Village of Willow Springs. My guess is the village would probably like retain an outside consulting firm, given the sort of the size of the project and that it's a tiny little community. They probably don't have a ton of sophisticated planners. So they'd bring in an outside firm and they would give feedback to Willow Springs, like, hey, if you really want to do this along the west side of the property, you've got to have like a 200-foot strip where you leave the trees and it's a buffer in a sense. I'm just making things up, but that's the kind of stuff they would say. And that would be sort of the informal part of it. And then the village would send out notice to all property owners within 250 feet or 500 feet saying, Plan Commission is meeting on this day. And there would be one Plan Commission meeting for public comment. There might be 5 days of public comment. I don't know if I brought up the example of that Haymarket project in Itasca where they bought the Holiday Inn Hotel. It was like day after day after day in a junior high gymnasium. That's how many people were showing up to talk. It might be similar here, but Bridge or whoever contract purchaser is entitled to that process, so it's sort of informal. Plan Commission gets notice, you have Plan Commission hearings. Bridge or whomever makes their case. They bring in appraisers saying there'll be no diminution in value for adjoining property owners. Traffic will be addressed this way. Lighting will be addressed that way. Water issues will be addressed this way. Every conceivable thing that needs to be dealt with would be dealt with by their experts. And they would say, hey, we've thought about this. We're going to engineer this. Lighting now goes down. It doesn't go out to the sides. Any objection. Even things like pollution. You know, we'll monitor the air. Or these trucks are going to become battery operated in a few years. You know, things like that. Once you get past the Plan Commission, they make only a recommendation. That goes to the full board, so they could recommend in favor of the requested changes or against them. In either case, it goes to the full board. Oftentimes, if a Plan Commission says we don't recommend, the developer will kind of take a step back, meet with the planning team, and try to amend their plan to get it the recommendation. But in either case, it goes to the village trustees, who then can either vote up or down on it. That is, at a high level, what the process is. Whether you're talking about unincorporated property and you're in front of the Cook County Plan Commission, or it's a municipality in an incorporated area.
And you may recall, when we put the scoreboard in, new scoreboard at Bennett Field,
Yep.
we went through the exact same process with the Village of Western Springs,
You're right.
because they wanted the amendment to the conditional use permit for the electronic scoreboard. Went through the same thing. We had a planning commission committee hearing, we had a planning commission recommendation, and then they took it to 2 village board meetings before they finally voted on it.
Yeah, there were a
Basically
lot
the
of
exact
meetings
same
like
thing.
that for like lighting stadiums, when that sort of
Yep.
took off, and lighting practice fields or more high-tech stadiums that produce more light. there were a lot of these public hearings where schools were going in front of plan commissions. This would obviously be a private operator doing it for a different purpose.
Too, like the village clearly has made this major political, right? I mean, they're putting out communications already saying that it's no, that the answer is
And
no.
they've got the
And they're
school
saying,
district
they're saying
and the
publicly
park
that it's
district
no, but
involved.
you've been adamant about saying like that process cannot be arbitrary or capricious.
Right.
They have to be given a fair process, which I think, to your point, is why they're so fearful, because it's going to get into this is going to get into their process potentially, and I think they're terrified that it might get there.
Yeah.
For a couple reasons, for what you said, but also just from the legal process that they know is in place there. It's not one person pounding the table and saying we're never going to allow whatever in this community. It's more. It sounds like, and Eris, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds much more technical, legal, and fair than just a political process.
Right, there'll be a lot of expert opinions that are given to address the various issues. And, ultimately, it's really the risk that the contract purchaser assumes. You're sort of along for the ride, because if they don't get to the finish line, they're going to walk away, and you might end up with keeping some of the earnest money, but you're not going to sell your property.
So really, the person that we bid on, we want to make sure that they're serious
Oh, absolutely.
and that they're equipped to fight it, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, and frankly, anybody who can come up with $500,000 of earnest money is going to be a serious bidder.
Right,
And the
yeah.
folks that were looking at this are reputable players in the business. Prologis, Bridge, Seafried, all the ones that Brian contacted are the real deal. That's what they do, Centerpoint, Duke, Brennan. You had given a few suggestions, Julie, and I can't remember who they were, but there were others.
Yeah, yeah. Did I catch your main point? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it, was that you feel like there's enough, what might be coincidences, might not be coincidences, with specifically Bridge. Not so much as broader than Bridge, like specific to Bridge and the work that they've done with other local municipalities and the names that keep coming up, and your concern is like it makes you feel you can't trust them, and you're concerned there could be problems down the way legally, I think I heard you say, right?
Yes, I went through this. So all these people in this picture are all interconnected, Bridge being one of them.
But, I'm sorry, and they're at a groundbreaking for
McCook.
which is a bridge, like they're there
Property.
because they own the property?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
They're
But they-
all interconnected. Chris Getty, the McCook mayor, and John, whatever his name is, Proza, whatever.
So a
They
guy
call him
from
Paz.
Bridge
That's what
and
he
the
told- remember
mayor.
that- What is his nickname?
They all
The
had-
person
they-
that's over our property
Okay.
for Bridge.
I do want to try to understand why they would have mentioned that meeting with Bridge over a year ago, if that was considered confidential discussion.
And who did they mention it to? I mean,
Willow Springs.
To Willow
He's
Springs.
the one that said it at the podium tonight.
And that
Okay,
was a meeting, it was that
He's
when
part
we
of the
first
Willow Springs.
originally.
Yeah, the first meeting we had with
Village
Bridge was
board.
April
April.
of 2020 with Jill and Julie,
Eris,
me, Eris, and Brian.
So what was March? Was that just,
Well, March, we
bid
got the
came
letter of
in.
intent.
The letter
We
came
came
in.
back in closed session here to talk to the board in April, and the result of that first closed session discussion was, hey, why don't we bring Bridge out and listen, basically.
Yep.
But Michael, I guess, and I'm sorry to keep going back, I just feel like I'm missing something, and maybe it is the jet lag.
Yeah, I don't know what you're missing. Like,
So they
I
did
don't
it, they did
fully
it.
understand what the motivation would be either.
okay, well then that's fine. If
Well, no, I'm
that's,
at- but
I mean, I
I
tried to
asked.
tell you. I think the TTO is involved,
Okay,
and so like you
Okay.
guys can take it as if, however you like. This is my feeling about all of the connections that are right there in front of us. And again, I said we've gone go, and only up until the last 2 weeks, it's been no, or yeah, they said no, and then they came back and said no, we want to get back in, and then now Eris is saying saying, oh, it's tentative. When it's been go. That's what led
Okay.
us to all of this.
But,
so
but
why?
what happened between April, when you're saying, that's what I'm missing, go. I think we talked to them in April, and I don't know that anybody talked to Bridge until December. or
You're saying they got
November.
us going on this. Bridge did.
No, Bridge had
Started the
said
whole
that
process.
it was likely well back over 10 months ago. Bridge said it was likely.
But then, was there a gap, like, I don't know, was there a gap in communication with Bridge from anybody in this room between April and
We
don't
were
know.
doing the Casarda study, we were
December.
like
Yeah, but we didn't talk
finalizing
to
the
Bridge.
strategic
Did it, we
plan.
weren't, and so when you're saying go, 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 again, market conditions took a tank in there, right? And like, interest rates went way up, the Fed moved everywhere.
Okay.
Industrial REITs had a shit year after they were the only sector that survived the pandemic glowingly, right? Office did crap, everybody did crap. Like, I think it's unreasonable for us to expect that their bid from March is, I mean, it had a date, it had this is good for 7 days, like, they can't say like, oh, take your time, like, if you want to talk to us in a year, it's going to be firm. That's the, like, so I don't think we had any information
That's fine.
in that
Julie.
gap.
I'm
That's-
just telling you what
yeah.
I think. So you can take it however you want. And so I'm done with it.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
I think, but I guess, I do understand though, Michael, that concern, especially when you said that they put it on the table, then they took it off the table. Like, the whole like kind of wavering that went on last week, basically. I mean, we thought on Tuesday there was gonna be no earnest money. And then all of a sudden they were like, no, we'll do that with you guys, but we want to work through some terms and conditions. So there has been some, I guess I would be curious of what the real actual intent would be and just how like legitimate or how far they were willing to take this process. I think what's frustrating is that if they were having conversations with the Village of Willow Springs about having a conversation with us, that this whole time just kind of set us all up to be, you know, public enemy number one from the village's perspective, from the park district's perspective, and from the school district.
But, I mean, to be fair, we also said no to meetings that were asked of us, and you emailed us about it, and it made, I totally agree, it made sense. We're not in a position to talk to Willow Springs.
It did, right.
And we didn't say anything, you know, we didn't say anything back tonight to correct the misinformation that was shared, which is an option as a board that we can do, and we tend to not do it, right?
Right.
Like, I don't know. So what is next for us?
Right.
Couple questions. Do you know how many, this is a completely different, I'm sorry, I'm switching subjects a little bit. How many kids at LT are that area?
124 current students. Just pulled that last week. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one,
To Julie's point, I have a couple questions for the board about that, about the communication. Like, this board, we all talked about this in October, right? What, do we engage with the park district? Do we engage with the school district, with the village ahead of time? I want to revisit that and say, okay, where are we at as of January 23rd? And I mean, I honestly, you guys heard it tonight, I've been hearing it for a couple weeks. Like, that relationship with all three entities is napalmed. So if we do reintroduce the idea of engaging with them at some level, it's going to have to be very strategic, and we'll have to find an entry point that might be difficult to do, but we can certainly do that.
Because they didn't want to meet with you after the bids were opened, right?
No, so they first reached
You
out
offered.
to me on December 27th, I think, or December 28th,
Yeah.
and and that was the school district. It was actually the president of the school board.
That's right.
The response we
Premature.
sent back was premature. The meeting is premature. Then the village, Melissa, the mayor, emailed me last week ago Friday, wanting to bring everyone again together. I responded to just them and said, again, the meeting on the 19th is premature. However, we would like to meet with you guys on just you. I didn't respond to anyone else, and I invited just the village to a meeting tomorrow. They didn't respond to that.
I mean, here's my question. What's to be gained by meeting with them? They all came and said what they needed to say tonight. I mean,
What's to be gained by not meeting with them?
they might, like,
I mean, what?
not be
what do we
positive. I mean, it's, what more can you have said?
I think
you're not
it's
gonna
the
change
age-old
your
question.
terms.
I think it's the age-old question of, is it better to ask someone for their input and then do the opposite? Or is it better to not ask them for their
That's my
input?
concern.
Well, and that was our conversation,
That was
to
our
be honest.
conversation, yeah.
And we
Yeah.
also said, we laid it at the feet of the village, and they know it. So
Yeah.
we did that. But I would also argue, and I said this to Jill as we were walking in here, because it just makes me crazy, and I know that this is just how it is, when people just get up and leave because you're complaining that you don't understand the work of the board, but you aren't paying attention to the work of the board. And especially the better part of 2 years. There's been nothing but community outreach about the direction of the district, conversations about facilities, constantly saying, you know, are we going to apply for a grant? Are we going to evaluate our reserves? Are we going to evaluate our assets? That has been discussed in the open at this table the whole time I've been on this board. So, I mean, I think part of it was, maybe it was naive just to say, well, we don't know until we know. What is there to talk about until we have something to talk about? So maybe that was
And there's
some
a lot of-
naivete, but.
And there's a lot of confidentiality in doing that to
Yeah.
get, I mean, I think they wanted our input. They wanted to give us our input, so like what you said, so we don't want industrial there. Okay, so we would say, we can have any bidder but an industrial bidder.
Right.
And then if we had said that, then they would have been like, we told them what we wanted and they didn't listen to us. I mean,
Right.
I think we're in a no-win situation, but I think we would be worse off if we got input and then ignored that input.
And that's
I
what we
think
talked
That's why we
just
were
about.
at that
predicting
place.
this, and who knows, like it's an alternate universe, right? But if thought about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, especially, and I think all of those conversations with the players would have been a tremendous push on their part to search for a buyer that is some version of retail or residential. And we know the history of the appraisal of that over the years here, and it's more like a $15 to $20 million sale versus a $55 million sale.
And I think that
That's-
changes it for us. I mean,
Yeah.
and the reason I asked the question, I mean, I knew the question, but the reason I asked you the question, but I knew the answer.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean? But was just to demonstrate to them, because I felt that followed up with all the emails we've been getting about, we can find a better bidder, you've got to do this, but to circle back to our fiduciary duty. And maybe it comes back that we can't get a bidder at 55 million, and then we as a board need to say, is it worth selling for 15 million?
I say go for a referendum.
But that's where, I mean, I just wanted to put that out.
This didn't
that
work.
Anybody can do it.
Didn't like this.
What I wanted to say was invite everybody to our meeting in 2 weeks so
Well-
that they can hear the whole.
Yeah,
it's
if
not
we were
about
gonna
this,
see,
but-
right.
But then, I
Right.
that wasn't going to be productive.
Right. I mean, that's just it. It's like, that was all focused on one community, one small community, and not, not the voices of the other 10.
Because around here, I have not heard, I mean, we took the dogs for a walk, like around the block,
Yeah.
like we took it around LT,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize it was like a basketball tournament going on, or I would not have gone that way. I would have gone a different way. And I had no less than like 6 people that I knew coming out of there telling me how great it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that, they weren't here tonight to say that. I think we're being, I had wanted to say it's for all of us. This land belongs to all of us,
Yeah.
which it's not just a limited amount, which brings me back to I had talked to you about this whole, with the land, with the dirt bike road. I think we, as a district, are, when you see the aerial view and everything of it, I think I would like to say we probably need to, I mean, and you had said that, check with the insurance carrier now that we know that this exists, that we're allowing people to use like ATVs on there. What kind of risk are we putting the district to, knowing that this is going on there? And what do we need to do?
So we
I
are
didn't even know
allowing-
that was a thing.
I saw it on Google Maps too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're, by not, I would say, I mean.
Someone's
you
on that
speak,
land.
But I would say,
Somebody,
we're giving permission if we're not stopping.
My suggestion, Brian, contacts Gallagher Bassett or whoever you guys work with as your insurance consultant. Say, here's what we've learned on this 71-acre parcel. There might be dirt biking, there might be ATV, maybe there's snowmobiling in the winter. What should we do? And they'll probably, if you don't already have signs, they might suggest that. Maybe they'll say, fence it off.
Yeah.
That's really gonna blow things up. But, you know, that may
I
be
think a
what
sign
they
might be
tell
better,
you.
but I
Yeah,
think
because
that
people
sends
have
the
been public
message.
about hiking out there.
Right.
Oh, see, I
right,
didn't
right.
catch that.
Like walking their dogs and
Yeah,
like.
people are saying that they would.
It is
I don't think
un- it
anyone
is
said it
un-
tonight. I think it's been through in some of the emails that have come up.
But
But I think,
Well, they did say it tonight.
Did they say, yeah.
that.
like they view it as their land.
I know.
And, but I worry about as a risk for the district. I mean, walking through there's probably not is the same risk. I mean, you're not.
Well, I mean, but we don't thin those trees. I've driven by a gazillion times. Emma has a friend down in the neighborhood right there, and it looks like you're gonna walk in there and the trees are gonna eat you. I mean, it's not.
It's not
kept
maintained.
up.
It's not been maintained.
Yeah,
It's just-
not
it's-
forest preserve
yeah.
where they do
Yeah.
So
birds
you're not
and
seeing the
trim.
educational aspect of it?
I'm
just kidding you. I'm totally kidding you.
I'm trying to look. I always look at every
So-
angle.
Just totally
I
giving
think
you a hard time.
it's important that we reflect back on, did we do all the things like along, you know, I appreciate.
Or what could we
that-
do better?
I appreciate that conversation, but then coming back to, you know, maybe an underestimation, but also, you know,
Yeah.
all the things we just said. That we didn't.
Are you
know.
looking for feedback though on what to communicate? No, I'm
No,
sorry.
I guess
I'm
the-
misunderstanding.
Off the top, my first question is, we have this communication going out tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Are we still good with that? I mean,
Read it again now.
it's reflective of what happened tonight. It indicates that the
It's pretty short.
bids were rejected. It restates the rationale for exploring the land. It did have the paragraph that talks about the board is going to continue to communicate and negotiate with interested parties and work towards achieving a goal of an overall goal of selling the property.
Let me see if I can find it. Brian, let me pull it up.
So right now that's scheduled to go out at 9 a.m. And that will go to the same distribution list that the November 30th communication went to, which includes the mayor of Willow Springs. So she got that message on November 30th.
And she can, so like, I guess that's going to be my question. So we only have the email addresses we have.
Yeah.
How do you get that to all the public when they claim they had no idea? Do we depend upon the mayor of Willow Springs to
Yeah.
give that to their community?
So it really went to anyone who signed up for our e-news list. It went to current parents, current students, current staff, and our alumni association database. Part of the discussion that we had back in November was not doing anything targeted to the residents that live near there or to the community. So unless the residents fell in one of those buckets, then it wouldn't have went to them.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we communicate that to them? I mean, what's
How
the
do
Do
way?
we
we-
have an obligation to? Maybe
Well, I guess-
just
okay.
playing devil's advocate
Yeah.
tonight.
Oh, no, I'm totally, but like,
Well, through press release, through public notice, 3 times published in the
The
newspaper,
I guess that
um,
there's hardly a
the
newspaper
The
website.
anymore.
website, yeah.
and social media
I
channels.
mean, they're going to be all over the website now. They know to look, so
Yeah.
it's probably not a moot point.
But we said it out loud
Right.
twice, at least twice before this meeting, 2 or 3 times that we had this property, the website to discuss. So I'm going to read the statement to you guys. Dear LT, no? Yes.
Is this from the?
This
Oh,
is,
yeah.
this
yeah,
is for
got it, yeah,
tomorrow,
yeah.
planned for tomorrow, and just want to know if this is okay to go out. We are writing to share an update on the Board of Education's process to explore the sale of the Lyons Township High School District 204 owned Willow Springs property. At its meeting on Monday, January 23rd, the board voted to reject 2 bids the district received at its public bid opening on January 11th due to the bids not conforming to the approved terms and conditions. The bids were $46.5 million from Prologis, $55 from Bridge. Please know that the board remains committed to exploring the sale of the Willow Springs property and will continue to communicate and negotiate with all interested parties in the coming weeks in order to achieve our overall goal of selling the property. And then we backtrack a little bit and say that the board adopted a strategic plan in 2021 and outlines the goals towards achieving that vision. One of the goals in the plan is to allocate resources necessary to maximize success for all students. It's basically what we've been reiterating. And then there's a litany bullet points of modernization of existing classrooms to meet 21st century learning needs, development of additional collaborative spaces for student and staff, accessibility and life safety upgrades, improvements and additions to student and community, athletic and wellness facilities, upgrades to HVAC systems, and further installation of air conditioning for improved temperature control. We close it with, to learn more about this process, please visit ltwillowspringsproperty.org. We will continue to keep the LT community updated as we move forward.
Don's able to join us.
Oh, okay. We can call it, thank you.
I'm gonna just grab a drink.
So that's the statement. It doesn't say a whole lot more than exactly what happened tonight.
Do we need to say more?
I don't think we do. And I know that this is gonna, but I don't think we need to say more, but I think we need to decide what more we're willing to do.
Willing to do.
Hi there.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Dawn. Thank you for joining
Thank you
us.
for calling me, guys.
Sure. Thank you.
I have one clause that maybe just caught my attention, and I'll
Okay.
just mention, we don't have to change it, but.
No, that's
um,
fine.
It's in the, please know that the board remains committed to exploring the sale and will continue to communicate and negotiate with all interested parties in the coming weeks. I'm worried about the limitation on weeks and maybe maybe we don't need the
Just take it out.
timeframe.
Mhm.
And do we need to say in order to achieve our overall goal of selling the property? Like, or could it just be, is it more effective or less incendiary and still accurate to just have a hard stop after all interested parties, which.
I like that change.
It would say, please note
I
that
like
the
it.
board remains committed to exploring the sale of the property
Okay.
and will continue to communicate and negotiate with all interested parties.
Hold on one second. Let me get my editing
For the
document here.
future, or some
Do you have it up?
time.
Yeah.
Because I can make
Okay, so, sorry, Julie. I'm where I need to be.
third paragraph.
It's
Okay.
the please know the board is just stopping after interested parties. But feel free to.
Dawn, we're reviewing the communication draft that we are planning to send out tomorrow as a follow-up to the meeting.
Perfect.
Just changed it. Oh, are you in the Google Docs or on your own?
No, I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
send it separately to Jerry and
I
Mary
just
Lynn so
removed
they
it.
can.
I just removed it from there. So please know that the board remains committed to exploring the sale of the Willow Springs property and will continue to communicate
With
and
all-
negotiate with all interested parties.
Boom.
And take
It's
out the
not
rest of
untrue.
that sentence.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think the other part of it is redundant.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay.
okay.
Well, there was one. Did you have another one though? Another thought? I thought you had.
It was
one
all
more.
within the same.
Okay.
And no teaser, to Jill's point, no teaser about, I'm trying to think of ways to like shift the narrative, which is give people tours of all the holes in the floor and holes in the, whatever, like seriously, somehow better demonstrate or communicate the need.
Well, you know what we could do is put it on the willowspringsproperty.org, just like as an
Yes.
event. We can put it there, like, join us for the, results of the facility assessment. Like, you can just put it as an event without being overt about it. But the only thing, I wanted to go back to this sentence here. Please know that the board remains committed, blah, 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 negotiate with all interested parties. But I think somehow we have to be clear, they have to meet this, that bar is set there now. We have to meet them minimum. I think that should be clear here, because we aren't negotiating with all parties, only people that
Meet
are
the minimum
committed.
threshold.
All qualified interested parties?
We'll ask
Subject to the
Donovan
minute-
what their
subject to the-
recommendation is for that, but I do think that
Well, or
that's
legally.
an omission that
what
needs to
we- what
be.
we're
Well,
saying,
I mean,
how do we-
that would make it super clear. I don't know, I think you could go either way, whether you say they have to meet that $55 million minimum, it's a qualified buyer, an interested party. You can't do a deal with anyone who's offering you less than 55 million is what it boils down to.
Well, I think that they could probably come up with language, even if it's just negotiate with all interested parties that meet
The board's approved minimum, you could say something
the
like
board's
that.
approved
like
minimum.
that.
Yeah, something
Okay.
very, but just that makes note of
Yeah.
it, because otherwise I think,
Because then here's the problem, they want us to commit, like sell to someone that's 10 million, but that's not our minimum to meet our
So
standard.
what about this? And negotiate with all interested parties that meet the board's approved minimum sale price.
I think that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Meet singular. Carrie, I can see you typing. I didn't know I could. I'm so
And-
unfamiliar with Google.
Yeah,
Docs.
I'm doing it live, so you can see it live.
But
If anybody
it's
has it
also
up, they can see it.
sale price and
Thank you.
Mhm.
terms and condition, because we just rejected a bid for not conforming to terms and conditions. I don't know.
So we worried that but we also said that we're at the point now where we can sort
Okay.
of
Oh,
have
that's true.
discussions
That's the one
and
difference
negotiate
between,
at the
moving
terms and
forward.
conditions.
Yeah.
We can leave as long as the board does not change the minimum sale price, we can leave the sale kind of open-ended, but we can engage with potential buyers as long
Awesome.
as they're
Okay.
willing to meet
Then
that.
This works.
Yeah, I mean, can I make a suggestion maybe on sort of next
Yeah.
steps here? Because I do think it's sort of a strike while the iron's hot. Let's see, Julie made a good point. The market isn't really getting better, and if the Fed continues to increase interest rates, I think it's going to be more detrimental to value and even push the country into a recession. But we know we have some interested groups out there.
Mhm.
They communicated with Brian Stashak. NAI Hiffman had two, what they called qualified interested parties. Prologis is interested, Bridge is interested, there may have been others that you heard from, Brian Seafried maybe. Let's reach out to them and see, are you interested in presenting us with a letter of intent at the board's minimum? And if they have different terms and conditions, that's fine. We can at least look at them, consider them, and then if all the feedback is, we can't do 55 million, I think that's a different decision. Then you have to decide, do we hit the reset button on the process? Do we hit the pause button and just wait and see what's happening with the economy? That's, I don't know what the right answer is if everybody says 55 is too high. You guys have to decide, having heard from, I counted 31 people, and not all of them were negative on this, a handful were positive. How much are you willing to navigate in terms of pushback and that sort of thing?
So if Bridge or someone other than Bridge were to come through with the $55 million, say in the next couple weeks or so, does this become just another closed session discussion with the board, say in February, or as they become available? Is that the plan?
We would
Is that
do
how
what
we'd
Julie
wanna do
said,
that?
which would be negotiate the terms of a letter of intent and then the purchase and sale agreement, if somebody's willing to pay 55. And then if we got to that point where both sides are in agreement, it would come to you for your consideration, and then you'd have an action item on the agenda to approve it.
Right. But prior to that, like when they submit what their terms and
That's
conditions
all
look
closed
like,
session
that would be stuff
discussion.
we would have discussions first,
Yeah.
right, before we could move it along.
Right.
Just, okay.
So Carrie, I'm not looking at the live copy of
Sure.
that. Can you read how it ends?
Yep.
Like in terms of qualified parties.
Yes. So the statement reads, it's in the third paragraph. Please know that the board remains committed to exploring the sale of the Willow Springs property and will continue to communicate and negotiate with all interested parties that meet the board's approved minimum sale price.
Okay. That sounds great to me.
Yeah. So we're being clear that it has to still be the $55 million sale price.
What's the probability that if we get the 55 million, Bridge or Duke or whatever you mentioned, they come in at 55 million, we approve it, what's the probability that Willow Springs will change that zoning mode or allow that to happen? Is that a crapshoot?
I think a sophisticated organization like Bridge or Duke isn't going to go to the trouble of negotiating a contract unless they think they have an opportunity to change the zoning. Because A, they're spending money even getting to the point of a contract. B, once they get to that point, they've got to do all this environmental and physical assessment of the property, hire engineers and environmental consultants. Then they have to hire all these experts to engage with the village. So my personal feeling is they will only do it if they feel good about the possibility of getting the zoning change. And I think that's what the village's concern is here, is that the odds of getting a zoning change are actually pretty good, but they don't want to be put in a position of having to make that decision and change the zoning. That's why they're being so vocal in defense of their current zoning and the status quo.
Yeah.
That's
because
my
it's
take.
that board that's going to say,
Terrified.
we don't want to make the decision because when the decision comes to us, we have to take the tax money over the green space.
Right.
I
Would
mean,
be
that's
more
what it's
like-
going to
gonna
come
be voted
to.
out.
They'll try to do both, though. They'll try to negotiate some green space into the property, like they'll, as Eris was saying, I think last closed session, like they'll negotiate the number of square footage of industrial space that they put. It's a back and forth, right?
Exactly. So it would really be more along the lines of, I'm on the plan commission or I'm a trustee for Willow Springs, and I'm like, holy cow, these guys have nailed every one of the standards. They've met the requirements to change it. They have the right expert here. I don't really have a choice but to vote yes or if I vote no, it's going to be subject to litigation, and Bridge is going to file a lawsuit saying they didn't get a fair treatment through the process.
Wow, okay.
But the only way they would do an agreement with you is if they felt they had a pretty good shot at getting the zoning relief.
So if they're going along with us, they know their ways through that
That they have a
process.
feeling that they can get what they're looking for. They wouldn't start spending money if it was going to be futile.
Okay.
And Eris, can you speak to the whole, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but it wasn't the right time since we were going into open session. But can you speak to the whole annex thing? I don't know if that applies, and I don't want to spend time on it if it doesn't apply, but it seems like there is a concern that with the UPS property, it was not going to be zoned. It was not going to meet the zoning requirements. So instead of it going through Willow Springs, somehow Hodgkins annexed it, and it sounds like they were kind of railroaded into the situation. They had nothing to do. Is that in play here?
Not really, because we believe that all aspects of this property are part of the Village of Willow Springs. They're within the corporate boundaries of Willow Springs. Another community like Hodgkins or Countryside or Burr Ridge can't sort of annex something that's already been annexed by an existing municipality.
So that's not in play, even
It
though
is
that's
not
a
in
community
play.
concern.
No.
Okay, thank you. I did have another question within that same area, but it's actually not in the same area. And I apologize because I joined late, but did you guys talk about communication, to the idea of communicating anything to refute some of the inaccuracies, or updating the FAQs to refute some of the inaccuracies of the public comments tonight?
We have not discussed it, but I think it's a valid point. I think we did talk about were there opportunities to do some other things with the landing page, and Jill, like you mentioned, doing some potential invitations to be a part of the facilities, taking a look
Just
at the
to
property.
make note of that as
Yeah.
like on that page, like come join.
Yeah.
Or listen in or whatever. About there was a lot of questions about why do you even need this, and you have all the funding or whatever, and I don't think people understand the state of the facilities.
Yeah,
which
that's a big
We're
point.
not going to get there. I mean, these are their homes, so I think it's
This is
also
affecting
like
their bottom line. So.
I don't think we
Yeah,
need to die on that hill of
you're
like,
right.
communicating against all of that. It's not going to really change.
I think that there's a large percentage of the population who does understand it and does get it and does know, what we would be using the funds for. I think you're right. We'd be talking to them, but why would that make a difference to them? And that's kind of even like when we discussed like this whole concept of the town hall. And I mean, how did they even get to the point in 2005? They probably heard the exact same arguments. I don't think anything would have been different. And so that's probably how they ended up coming to to abandoning the sale, because they heard the same things.
And I don't know how over the top we need to go, but I mean, I sat in strategic planning meetings with teachers who were pretty new to the school, who they all said, oh yeah, when we got here and saw, we knew about LT, but saw the shape of like the rooms we're teaching in and the inflexibility of the space and the chalk. My kids were floored to see chalkboards on the walls. Like, none of that gets out. And so like, but how much PR do we want to do about threading this, there's downside risk to things like this too, right? To be like, it's a recruiting risk, it's a retention risk that we don't have updated facilities. This is how it ties into educating the student.
Yep.
I mean, everybody tonight only focused on, they must have had some talking points that went around about all they care about is air conditioning, but shit. Then we hear for a year, or, a short period generally at the beginning of every school year, multiple emails about kids passing out, you're killing our kids, they're vomiting, they're going home with strokes, they're ambulance at the school, and it's like...
Yep.
Yeah, I struggle with a little bit, though, with a couple of things. Like when I hear people talk about our healthy reserves, and that we should not be, that we have $78,000 or whatever that gentleman said in health reserves, and that we shouldn't be counting on this money, that we have the reserves to do it. To me, that's an opportunity to educate our community to the fact of what the standard is for us to have reserves and what that money is for. I think that's valuable in and out of this conversation. So, I mean, that's something that I think would be an easy thing to throw on the FAQ to talk about the reserves, and if we have this much in reserves, why is this money important, or is any money important? And then the other thing that I struggle with is that if we, this is a beautiful situation that we might be able to have this asset turned into funding. And I've said this before, that it's a gift, but it's a gift that comes with a lot of responsibility. And I said this to Brian in a conversation recently, that we still bear the burden and the responsibility to message why this is important, much like if we had to go to a referendum. Like, you want your masses coming along with you. So even if we had to go to a referendum, we'd be messaging all sorts of things as to why these are things that are important. And I still think, to some degree, that messaging is still something we should take on. And maybe not right here and now. Maybe that's more in the justification of why we're doing certain things, why we're looking at spending the money on certain things over other things. But so as to not be looked at like an ivory tower board, I feel like it's important that all that information is put out there with good justification, with good process to show why we're doing the things that we're doing above other things.
No, I think that's a really good idea, because that is, if all of this moves forward, that it, why did this department get X and why did that department get Y, and why is this field beautiful and this field still looks like whatever, right? I think that is a good idea down the road, for sure.
Well, but then, so I guess I'm trying to understand what you mean, Jill. Like, are you saying
everybody's going to want that money for their own?
Right. So how would we spin it? Because we want everybody to know that it would go to all these amazing good things, or could go to any of these.
Well, I
potential
think
things.
what Don's saying, like, broadly, talk about the thing, the digest of the huge binder that was, shared with us. These are the kinds of things, and these are the considerations, and we're going to discuss it at board meetings and kind of hear how we can stretch it. I mean, you're never going to make everybody.
Right.
Because we
You can be open about it.
we had a auditorium full of people that do not want this, but we have a gazillion auditoriums full of people who want this, but they aren't passionate about it because they don't know what this can buy them. So unless they know, wait, you're talking, I can get whatever it is, a new gym for my kid or a new whatever for my kid
Baseball field.
versus, the forest in Willow Springs. I want that. And I want it so I think it's good to communicate some of that facility stuff as soon as we can do some kind of something, just because I think we need people on the other side passionate for why we are doing this.
Because otherwise they'll be passive, I fear.
Agreed.
We're never going to sell the people who's backed up
No.
to a beautiful forest right now that are enjoying wildlife. We're never going to sell them on the fact that UPS is going to be built right next to them. I mean,
We're not going to win them.
we're never going to win them over.
When that fence
I would
goes up, they're not going
never.
to be happy.
I mean, we'd be fighting this tooth and nail if that was us in that property. They have a right to fight this as much as possible because their property is going to be hurt by this. So I think we just need to get the people who are going to win from this feeling
Really
like they're
excited.
going to win from it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think there's two sides of this, and there's one side that I think is more immediate, and that is like where do we feel that there is value in correcting some of the inaccuracies? So when I hear about the balance, when I hear about people talking about balance funds, I feel there's value in correcting that, because whether that's for this argument or an argument about down the road about why my taxes are so high, there's value in people understanding why we have the reserves that we have. When I think about the argument of refuting some of the Willow Springs comments about like them contacting us to have these meetings, it's like a he said, she said at that point. I think there's no value in that. That one is not worthy to me. But I think we should pick up. There are some messages that came out of tonight that I think probably should go on the FAQ to just, if nothing else, broaden the education and understanding of our broader community. And then the second part of it is, how do we start communicating the excitement, the value, the march behind some of the changes that we could do, and make sure that we have a strong community force just thrilled and passionate and exciting about the upcoming changes and feeling like that they're part of it and they've had a voice in it. So to me, it's two different things.
So, but does this turn into then board meetings where you have one side of the aisle screaming at another side of the aisle?
Yeah.
And
That's
I mean,
not
what
good
are we
either.
looking for in the future here? I'm just
Right.
throwing out things.
We also
So
have
true.
a problem because
So
in the
true.
facility study, it talks about the $25 million bond issue. So if we're talking about a 25 million bond next year, this other side, Willow Springs, is going to be up and livid even more so that we're talking about the 55 million. So we need to figure out how that communication is going to happen as well when that facilities study conversation comes up.
The whole price tag is $155 million, right? Like, so
Granted.
to your point, yes.
Yeah.
Somehow have to, like, this is just,
And it's in phases,
Part of
but
it, right.
that's coming due next year where you'll get an immediate, like, 25 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're talking about the sale of this property for 55 million. They're going to be livid that you're already getting 25 million,
And you're gonna get.
and then you're
Greedy.
right.
Yeah, but I think that's exactly why it's incumbent that we have a process that starts to look at these things and prioritize these things and have community input towards these things and monetize these things so that we understand. I mean, we all know that $80 million, 25 for the bonds and 55 for the potential sale of the property, is still not going to allow us to get everything that is potentially on our list. So I think that's where we have to have a strong process of community input and study and evaluation to really understand, of all the $155 million projects that we can do, how do we prioritize what the top, 80, 85 million is. I think it's jumping down the road a little bit, but to me, that's, it's definitely on my mind about how we do this so it doesn't look like we are just coming in with a short amount of study and deciding on changes for all that money.
So I can't just, in the interest of time, I want to cover a couple things I know that I've heard we've said, and I just want to get some consensus from everybody on this. But one is that we've agreed to the communication and we've updated it, and that will go out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to the community. Two, I'm hearing some feedback that we might want to add some additional comments to the FAQs section of our website. And so I think we've heard a few things. One is to address the reserve value. This may be something we might want to talk about, Brian, how to use the reserves. And then, what was the other one? I'm sorry, what else did we do? We said there was a couple other things. We did not want to get into the dates or anything like that. Is there anything else? If there is anything else, you guys should let us know. Send an email with the.
Is the reserves complicated, Dawn? Are you asking just for the stated balance to say this, our balance,
Right.
the reserves as of a certain date are blank?
think
Or
that's
because I
helpful.
feel like it's a more complicated art of, and I don't know how much we'd legally want to put out publicly around.
I think you
Like,
have
we
to tie it
try
to,
to-
school ratings and what's recommended
Right.
and things like that, just
There's
for
a
safety. Like,
percentage. Yeah.
I
Have
don't
that
think
on
you
the
have to get
website,
into the
Brian?
weeds. I think,
Do we have
this
that on the
is
website
why
anywhere?
we have.
Like in the same way that
this.
you put the tax levy
And it
summary
gets
together,
us
do we
up
have
We
it
don't.
on reserves?
No, we don't. I mean, there is a board policy
Yeah.
that talks about the reserves, which I think, is sort of the endeavor of at least 33%. Of course, there's also recommendations from the state, which are closer to 50%. And look, one good example of why it's good to have reserves has just occurred. And what I mean by that is, you may recall that we collected all of our 2021 property taxes, the first collection in, up through February, March, and kind of April of last year. And then we went almost 9 months without any additional property
Right,
tax money
right.
because we first started collecting the second installment here in December. And so there are districts that don't have that and had to go out and borrow money, and you're paying interest on that to make your payroll, those kinds of things. And so, look, that's just one example. I mean, other examples are that you can use those reserves if they continue to build. You can use those for projects. You can use them for capital, expense, those types of things. And yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of ways to look at that and put it out there. It's also a source of income, right? In terms of interest income, so there's a lot of ways to look at that. I think it just kind of depends on how we want to talk through that.
Yeah, and I've heard you, Brian, answer that question several times, and I think back to 2007 and 2008. Like if you like to withstand what happened in those years, you had to have some level of healthy reserves.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you were. So I know there's a way to put that together, and I've heard you say it at meetings and a variety of different meetings that that basically communicate. Look, we're not like sitting on a bunch of money that we shouldn't have. It's prudent that we have this type of reserve, and here's why. And that's above and beyond talking about anything else. So I'm sure I feel a million % confident that you could craft something that would,
Yeah. One of the questions too that I do recall that somebody, that one of our a speaker came and spoke at the end tonight, was that, if LT is always doing projects, why would this be any different? Like, how is this different? And so I think that maybe we could probably put something together that would be a response to that, about why the significance of this kind of sale has so much farther reaching potential than the kinds of projects we generally engage in. And maybe we have to say, a lot of times, the projects that we choose to, they're not really like pet projects. They're things we have to do.
Well, and what I thought was interesting too is that woman was on the LTCAC.
Yes.
So there is a question about, are we utilizing that council the way that we could be in some of these conversations? But also, she's only seeing what comes through here. She doesn't see the long list, I'm guessing, that comes with all the asks, and then we choose 5.
Right.
And that's kind of the point I think that Dawn and Allison are making too. If we can start talking about that a little bit, people don't always see the need, and they definitely don't see the depth of the need. They see whatever their kid is doing, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is a comparison, because if I wrote down kind of like a potential idea, I don't think it's a good idea, but an idea for a potential FAQ would be like, how does LT currently fund facilities projects? What that would lead to is, for example, if we looked at the last 10 years worth of spending, we spend about $2 million a summer on facility projects. We spent $23 million on the last bond issuance in 2014.
Yeah, about $22 million, yeah.
So we've spent $43 million on facilities projects in the last 10 years. And I think the average person would say, oh my gosh, that is a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
The reality is it's not. It's enough money to maintain the facilities as they are. It's not enough to do large-scale renovations. And so I think that argument would fall flat, because they would see it as, oh, why are they asking for more?
Yeah.
And to Michael's point, we have a $25 million bond issuance coming up a year from now with an estimated project of 110 to 130 million in the, that's what the and that's just a rough estimate of current pricing. Architects feel like, based upon all the input received in the fall, we're looking at about 110 to 130 million dollars worth of, that's to modernize every classroom, air conditioning, update athletic facilities, all the things that are outlined in there.
And if you took $130 million, and let's say we even spent $3 million a year, it'd take you a little over 43 years to get there.
Right.
And by that time, you'd have to turn everything all over again.
Right.
I mean, that's the issue. And don't forget, too, I'm going to mention this just because we keep talking about the bond sale. I just want this to be known. I don't think that this is going to happen. But the community does have the opportunity to stop a bond sale, too.
Yeah.
Just so everybody's aware of that.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely, but they do have that ability. There's, through a petition process, Harrison, what is there, so many, 10%?
Yeah, it's a backdoor referendum.
Yeah.
They get 10% of the registered voters within a 30-day window after the board approves, say for working cash bonds, they can force it onto the ballot. And when that typically happens, boards just abandon.
Yeah. So I just want that to be out there. I don't think any of that is going to be an issue. However, I just want everybody to be aware of that, because we're kind of talking about it like, well, it's a foregone conclusion that we'll have this 25. And it's probably true, but just so everybody's aware.
You never know.
So we're suggesting that we
Brian,
don't
you're
tell
sorry.
Bill about how
I'm
much we
sorry.
spend every year. Because you think that
Well, I'm
it's
throwing
I'm
it out
just
there. I think that
wondering-
could be ripe with concern.
I think
I
Not
just
that
think we
don't-
have to
not-
educate.
No, not that we don't share what we spend, that we don't, to
That when you
Alice's
look at the
point,
big-
that's not going to speak to the people in Willow Springs. They're going to
No.
they're going to see that as
No, but it
even
might
more.
educate the rest of the community so
But I
that they can be equipped to have those conversations with people in Willow Springs.
To get their
Then you have
support,
more
because
people
we
showing
need
up
them
to
louder.
support.
That
Is what
too,
Allison's
that too.
point is.
Maybe we
Yeah.
have it ready for the, and then it probably doesn't tie to the facilities discussion as context.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. Like, putting that in a vacuum and not connecting it to what our estimated project list is won't make sense. Because $43 million will just seem like
be
an
used
inordinate amount of
against
money that LT has spent on facilities over the last 10 years. But it's
If you're going to do that, you have to
You have to put it in
outline
context.
what Downers Grove South did, like what the woman talked
Yeah.
about tonight, like
Yeah.
which I thought, have seen what that
Yeah.
kind of shot in the arm can do for a school, right? But
I know, I guess.
that's a lot of
yeah.
work.
I felt bad for her.
I did
She's
too, but I
awesome. Julie
appreciated
Workman.
it.
Yeah.
She did a great
appreciate
job,
it.
yeah, coming up and speaking
She
and
said it's easy
My
cash.
husband-
I give
my
anybody
son-
credit who showed
Oh, is that
up
right?
because I give anybody credit
Feels
who
like
showed
for
up
him.
to speak in support
Right.
of the sale tonight.
It's that context.
The
that-
context is important.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
frame of reference.
when people look at their house, then because that's all they have to value it against, they say, well, I can replace the roof on my house for $15,000 or $20,000.
Yeah.
And the reality is, one section of one of our roofs, right? Now, that's not the entire facility. One section of a wing is $1 million
Right.
to replace
Yeah.
a roof.
Yeah,
And-
that
and-
$15,000 is a tile.
But that, right, right, but that
Right.
doesn't, compute with people because they look at it from their home economy.
Yeah.
And these are not, our facilities are not that.
Yeah.
I mean, I
and
think
when
to
you have
Don's.
people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, to Don's earlier point, I think, and I would want to run this by Jerry and Mary Lynn, but I feel like that the message starts with, this is our overall price tag. Then the second piece of it is, we're going to have an ability potentially to fund $25 million of that overall price tag a year from now, and a potential property sale would chunk off X dollars more. I think it goes in that order. Then it feels like it would speak to our larger community much more, because they would then see, because they know, right? They know what changes they would like to see in our facilities. And if we started with that first, then it leads down the road of, okay, now that makes sense. And actually some more specificity, which is in the binder, but like more specificity of what projects could potentially be funded from the 25, but also the 55.
And our community has told us this
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just,
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
it is.
combination of all kinds
Right.
of input that is, coming to fruition.
Yeah, I think I think all of this is really good and appropriate conversation because no one has any context. When you hear comments from community members, both and some of the feedback that we've heard, but also at the LTCAC is like, why don't you just start from scratch and build a brand spanking new state-of-the-art facility? That is like, it smacks you in the face that nobody has an understanding about what the cost of facility updates are. And Brian, I don't know the answer to this question. When you and I talked, we kind of brushed up upon this. So I don't know if this is a data point that would make sense. But when we look at like how much we're spending per student on certain things, like per student on your educational or your curriculum program, per student on whatever it is, I feel like there was a data point that said, on facilities, we spend X amount per person, per student. And while I don't have any actual data to back me up, I'm guessing if we looked at that and we looked at what we've spent over the years in facilities, we could be on the medium to lower end compared to other districts. If that's the case, that could be a valuable data point to have.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying. I don't know how you quantify that, but that's a really good point. Like,
I think I would put these questions to Mary Lynn
Yeah.
and Donovan Group. So instead of like having like crisis comms too, like let's talk about proactively how we want to approach it and see what they.
Yeah, but that particular data point, I feel like was an existing data point of what people looked at with school spend. And I don't know if it was on the Illinois Interactive Report Card, but there was a data point about this district spent X amount of money on curriculum per student. They spent X amount of money. So is this jiving, Brian Stachek or Brian Waterman? Does this jive with you at all? Is there a data point out there that looks at amount of spend per student?
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's just
everywhere
per
today
pupil,
was
but not
20K.
connected to facilities.
Yeah, I think
Is
it's
that what you're
more-
asking, Don?
Yeah, I felt like there was one connected to facilities.
We'll take a look. It doesn't ring a bell, but Brian.
Okay.
Brian, what do
Yeah,
you
there's
think?
a school finance.
So in the annual financial report, there is a per pupil expenditure cost. And so they actually exclude some of those costs in there, some of those one-time costs. But I take a look, but again, that's really generally related more to the curriculum expense of the district. So we can take a look at that. I've not seen one that specifically relates just to capital expenditures for the district. And it's kind of, you'd be hard pressed to kind of figure that out, because that can be for equipment, that can be for building renovations. There's a lot of different types of purchases that can fall under those capital expenses that wouldn't necessarily just qualify as, building renovations, for example. But we can take a look and see.
So I have, just to clarify, I've got explanation of reserve balances and why they exist. That's one idea. The recent history of facilities projects funding at LT, and then along with that, is there a comparison with other districts and a per student cost that Don was talking about? And then that would be some potential ideas for the FAQ. For future communications, it's more about like bringing specificity to what the funds would be used for. Like right now, we've got the 5
Yeah.
primary objectives,
Yeah.
but eventually fleshing that out and having
Yeah.
more specificity to it.
We kept it high level because it was, again, part of that whole premature discussion. We didn't really want to get too far into the weeds on that right now. We were focused on what the sale price was going to be, but we kind of knew that would be coming down the road, that there would be a need to get the community excited about what those things look like, and the only way to really do it is to get that granular and detailed and tangible.
And pictures. I was just
I know,
renderings.
and
If-
pictures,
I don't
too.
know.
I-
I haven't been able to
you know,
spend time in the
I think that's
thing,
something
but
that
when
we
we
have to
do
think
want to
about
get
doing,
people
too.
excited about spending money, if
Agreed.
they've got to see, again,
Visuals.
renderings, not.
Yeah.
Well, I think they also have to understand that, like, so much is going to a roof. So, I mean, like, it's maintenance.
Yeah, and that
I mean,
could
I
be a
think
part
that's-
where when we identify, or when we flesh out the exact number spent on facilities and start listing the projects like roofs and boilers and mechanicals, it becomes pretty clear that it's not, those are oftentimes not exciting projects.
Or bucket
Or
it
the
with the
electrical
rest.
thing
like,
that I thought was exciting is a big, right.
Just, yeah, I'm sorry, I
Oh,
haven't,
sorry.
I got the binder and I haven't been.
So I have
Able
one
to
more
see it,
question.
yeah.
I'm still trying to be cognizant of time because it is getting late. It's 10:30, guys. But I wanted to know, because we talked about this a little bit, and we put out that invitation for tomorrow to meet with the Village of Willow Springs and Village of Willow Springs, basically. Is there any interest at all from the board in us pursuing some communication with those parties? Or are we going silent on that? Because that would be part of like next steps. Do we follow up with them? Do we want to talk to them? I mean, I just want to hear it from everybody, like what they think. Because they might reach out again. They may not. I don't know. They certainly didn't respond.
I would say if they want to I think, I mean, again, they're going to say, we want residential, or we want this or that, or we don't want you to sell that. And I think just meeting, I would rather not hear the next time we meet, I would rather not hear that we're not allowing any meetings to go on. I felt like that, I mean, I was all for it, don't get me wrong, but I would rather not have another meeting where we're not talking to anyone. We can talk, and like Brian said, maybe it'll make them madder that they're saying don't do it and we do it, but
I think we also had confidentiality before in meeting,
Yeah.
was my understanding,
Well, we
that there
thought
was
it.
little that we could say, but now it seems
Right.
that we're in a different position with the confidentiality aspect. I
But
mean, we were,
are we asking if you want to be proactive and say like, hey, we're ready to meet? Is that what you're asking?
Or
or if they reach
or
out.
if we right,
I
we
guess
could,
what
we
I
could do
prefer
that.
is if
or-
I'm sorry to cut you off, go ahead.
No, I guess I just want to know what level of engagement are we comfortable with with the Village of Willow Springs at this point, given that
If you and Brian and who, I don't know who usually would be there to represent, are comfortable being in a conversation where, again, it might just be them venting, or without a stage, they might speak differently, who knows? If you're comfortable being in the room with them, great, but I think if they come to the next meeting and people are repeating, they've refused our additions, I would like one of you to please interrupt and say, excuse me,
right.
we've,
Met.
we invited you to a meeting and has not been
Sure.
received. Like, we have to, we're allowed to do that. We should be encouraged to shut that
Okay.
shit down when it shows up. I'm not saying tonight we should have.
No, I know.
But when you're saying, I don't want to hear it again, I think they could come again and say, just like we said last time, they rejected the bid, but I think people left confused.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, they rejected the bid, but they're keeping this going. I think they were kind of like shell-shocked and could assemble and have the next meeting be all this again. But
Yeah.
we need to correct misinformation when it's reputationally damaging and frankly untrue.
Okay.
It would be
Well,
my
and-
preference.
Yeah, no, I
So-
if I can.
I would make that untrue. I would reach out and say, now that everything's public, it's out, whatever, if you'd like to meet.
Like, forward the email that you sent last time to say still would like to meet. That would be
Never
my
heard
passive
from you.
aggressive route.
This is our,
Yeah, just,
Never heard.
we're available.
We did not
'Cause
hear
now
back.
We are. Now we are.
I get a little concerned though, and is Eris still on the
Yeah,
call with
Eris
us?
I'm still here.
Yes.
he was hoping to be
I get-
home before midnight.
Yeah, I get a little concerned about the meetings, and to some degree, I feel like some of those call outs that could potentially happen in a meeting are worthless if they're not in writing. So I feel like, to some degree, there's a statement that's missing here that says, and I'm not saying we have to do this statement, but in my mind, as I think through this, there's a statement that's missing that says the District 204 Board of Education believes we have a fiduciary responsibility to utilize this asset that is no longer deemed necessary for expansion of another school district to the best interest of the students of today and in the future. And to that effect, the District 204 Board of Education seeks to sell this property to maximize the benefits for its students. And I just don't know if going to a meeting and having that dialogue in a meeting and anything that you could do to clarify is going to get out in a written communication in the way that we would want it to, versus us doing a written communication that could in fact be published in some form or another as a very matter of fact, this is kind of our position. It's a position statement, right?
But I like that position statement, but I also just like the idea of, hey, you want to talk to us? Like, team approach, that's great. We still have an obligation, just as they have an obligation to their constituents, we have an obligation to ours. And, it might be a bust of a meeting, but at least we're available to meet.
But maybe, I agree with you, Allison, completely, 1,000,000% agree with you, that maybe you don't do one without the other. Maybe part of the missing piece is that we don't have that formal kind of position statement that we can fall back on to say, we hear you and we appreciate your concerns and we're listening to your concerns. But at the same time, please understand what our position is. And here it is, clearly.
Carrie said it tonight. She gave that statement.
Mm-hmm. I did say we have
I
fiduciary
feel like it's on
responsibility.
the website.
Yeah, I feel like we've said it in several different ways.
Are you saying more just in response to what happened tonight? I think
kind
at
of
the
like-
end of the day, for all of those homeowners, it does not matter. It's more about, to your point, trying to maybe rebuild severely damaged relationships, but also then I would worry, and I would ask Eris, what happens if we get
Right.
3 bids at $55 million? Are we going to have a conversation with Willow Springs about that? Is that appropriate? Is it not appropriate? How do you decide?
Well, yeah, so let's say that happens. I mean, I think the board would have to initially start talking to all three and say, hey, you need to improve your offer. We got 2 other offers at $55 million.
Now you get a bidding war.
You got a little bidding war going, and then you'd enter into a purchase and sale agreement. The people who spoke tonight, they don't want anything to change. So if you went to the village and them and said, we found a developer, they're willing to pay us $20 million, it meets every little bit of the current zoning, high-end residential, empty nester condos and townhomes, an assisted living facility, and sort of retail with the Starbucks and a Pilates, what everybody wants, studio. They would say, why would you take $20 million
Yeah.
and cause us to lose this great natural asset? All the, carbon capture comments would start coming at you. There's nothing they want other than to maintain the status quo.
Yes.
It doesn't matter
That's true.
what you come to them with. They will find a reason. You're going to overload the Pleasantdale schools with
Yeah,
these
that's-
large homes. You're going to overload the Pleasantdale Park District. Well, all these people wanting to use the pool or the running track or whatever facilities. They're never going to be satisfied. That's my assessment of what you're facing. There's nothing you can do to make them happy other than stop doing everything you've done and leave that land
Yeah,
alone.
leave it alone.
Yeah.
Back like 2004.
And then more than that, they need to run a referendum.
So what
Right.
we're
Because
saying,
They have to build facilities.
Exactly.
They don't want to
Yeah.
touch us with a
I
10-foot
know.
pole right now.
But at least
So
we're
ba-
offering.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
well, that's just it. Do
Playing
you want us
chicken
to
tag.
offer, or do you want us to just wait and see if they say anything?
Yeah, I think
Just
that's
leave it
to
alone?
Julie's point, right? Like, it's a different answer if they come to us again. Then I think we can strategically think, okay, do we, because then it's just
Alright.
us listening. If we reach out, I think two things. It's, number one, it's incredibly disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
And second, because of the history of the last 4 months. The second thing is, we're now setting the meeting, so we have to set an agenda.
Sure.
And what is that agenda? Other than we're ready to listen, we want your input.
Right.
We already
Which
got
we've
that.
heard.
We got it.
And we
know what
heard.
their
They
input
came to our
is. So I
board
don't know
meeting
what
and
that
they told us.
agenda would look like.
They
If
told
we
us.
reach out, I don't know what that would look
Okay,
like.
that's all. I wanted to just be very clear about that in case there was any grayness. I want to know where you all stood on that. And Allison wants to meet with them, so I'm going to send Allison.
And I
Yeah,
think
I would.
but here's
Just
the thing,
gonna go
like-
down the walking path through the land.
Yeah, you'd be like, can you bring up some Starbucks coffee?
and honestly,
I
it's
mean, I
frustrating.
know it'd be like it'd be an awful position to be in, but I just feel like you want us to be team players. We will meet with anyone now that we can. It's kind of saying now that we can, we're able to now. We didn't have anything to talk about before. We are under confidentiality. We are under this and that. Now we can talk to you. What do you want to talk about? Like, we have a fiduciary responsibility. You guys have a responsibility for your constituents. We get it. Like,
We may have to agree to disagree.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just the idea of, hey, because then we're saying, we didn't talk to you before because we really couldn't. We couldn't. We had nothing to say and we would get ourselves into trouble. Now, we can. So if you want to meet with us, great. If you don't want to meet with us, more than great. I don't
So,
know.
Allison, you're suggesting that we make that outreach to say, previous to tonight, we were held in confidentiality, but now post this meeting we can meet. So let us know if you'd like to do that. You're saying that we should make the first outreach to that effect.
I would.
But yeah, what changed? Just that we voted?
I don't know what changed.
Well-
I feel like we were able to talk about it
That,
openly, but
Well-
But we offered to talk about it after we opened the bids, I thought. Like, we've already
We
had
did.
hit that
Well-
data point in the sequence, right?
no,
Yeah.
we offered to talk about it
No,
tomorrow.
yeah,
for tomorrow.
an
Tomorrow.
email was
They
sent to
never
them a week
responded.
ago Friday and
We
invited
said
them to a
after.
meeting tomorrow.
Oh,
But
okay.
not the
They-
school district. I eliminated the school district and park district and just sent it to the village, which really frustrated the school district.
Yes, they think that we're intentionally hurting them too, that we don't care about students.
I don't necessarily know that there was anything that actually bound us to confidentiality prior to that though either.
I
So,
know, but
I
I
mean,
mean, I
that's the
did
other
feel
thing
like
we
we
have-
couldn't really talk
It was their
about it.
request that
Right.
it not be talked about. That's
Yeah.
really what it was at the meeting.
And ours as well, I think, right?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, we don't want to put ourselves in a position of saying, we say, well, we couldn't talk about it, and the village comes back and says, well, sure you could have, you just chose not. to."
Right, right. Okay, so
I don't know.
I think
So
that's the-
That's just my feel, though, so there's.
am I
7
hearing
that
from
are
the
saying
majority
no.
of people that we'd rather wait to see if they reach out to us?
I think we should reach out to them.
You do?
I think we should say, based upon the offer that we extended last week, we extend that offer again, and please provide the agenda. that you would like to talk.
So we want to push it
Yeah.
back on them to provide the agenda of what they want to discuss.
To at least hear them.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think the idea of like the offer still stands. Please let us know if you would like. We suggested a meeting of whatever date tomorrow is, and the offer still stands. Please let us know if you would like to meet.
So that's Allison, Michael, Dawn.
I have more
Anyone else?
questions though, like, who's are we having set the agenda? Are we setting the agenda to talk, or are we putting
If
that
they
agenda
can't
up
set
on
the
it?
agenda, then we shouldn't meet.
Okay.
They're the ones who requested this meeting, and we were responding, and we're
We said
just
we would do it
following
on the
up
25th.
on what we sent
Yeah.
out to them that they didn't respond to. And if they can't provide the agenda prior to, then we should meet.
I think though, that we when we invited them, we changed the conditions of that. Like their original, so
That's fine.
going back to that original request they had, it was not for just us, it was the park district and the school district. So
Because
we changed
just
it
asked
two
for
ways.
those.
We said, we only want to meet with you, and we want to meet at LT.
And then didn't they ask
So-
you for the agenda in that?
No,
They didn't.
They never responded.
They
So I think if I reach out to them again and say, we're reiterating our request to meet with just the village at LT, then I think it's
We
our
would have to come up
responsibility to
with
set
an
an
agenda.
agenda.
And what is the agenda going to say? Like open discussion? I'm not
Yell at us
familiar with
more?
the formalities of this agenda topic.
I'm
Yeah.
not for it, if that's the case.
You are for it, did
I'm
you say?
not.
You're not for it.
I'm not for it.
Okay.
But I am for
You're not
it
for
if
it?
they.
If what? What's the conditions, Jill?
I am for it if they, to discuss it, if they were to reach out again and present an agenda. But I agree that, and that was my concern, that we shifted the conversation to coming to meet here, which seems to be that we're setting the agenda if they're coming to meet here.
Yep.
And I don't know what that agenda would be and what we would gain. So I think it's futile at this point because we really heard what they needed to say.
Keep
to
in
us.
mind, when that message was sent to them on Friday, January 13th.
13th.
Yeah.
Friday,
It's the
January
13th.
13th. It was with the assumption that the board was going to approve the contract tonight. So we were inviting them to a meeting on the 24th,
Oh, fair, okay.
basically
Right.
presenting them, okay,
We've
last
done
night,
this, yeah.
last night,
Let's take the next step
let's
in the
take the next step in the
process.
process.
Yeah.
Thank you for that reminder.
I mean, obviously, a lot has changed since that email went out, so now it's,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if I feel like we caught them off guard with this, oh, we're keeping it open, and everyone left like, wait, what did that mean? And you may very well hear from
get another
all of
request.
those
Yeah.
municipalities together or individually of, help us understand what that meant, or we want to talk now, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
I don't know
see
what their
what we
agenda would
gain
be.
by inviting them to talk under this new, different than that what we thought was going to be taking the next steps.
Yeah.
Just to say that we invited them again and they said no again, to say that ever, we're going to work that in, we're not tit for tat people, like, I don't know if there's much utility in it.
Why did you switch it? Just curious. I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. Why did you switch it to just the Willow Springs trustees versus the original request of the school district and the park district and Willow Springs?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it went back to our discussions back in November about not engaging with the land swap with the park district and not bringing the school
Yeah.
district into this discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. And it would have been at that point, if we had gone ahead and approved the bid, then it would be in the zoning process. That would be back in the hands of Willow Springs. So it makes sense that they would be the people to talk to.
Yeah.
That it would have had nothing to do with Pleasantdale or the park district.
I think it's important. I found it interesting. So right now, I was thinking even before this process started that, first of all, the school district has been fearful throughout this whole time because they know that once the musical chair stops, they're the ones that are left without what they want, which is a early childhood center. But I'm a little surprised at the park district speaking tonight, because if the board navigates to an approved contract with Bridge or whoever else, the first thing they're going to do is go right to the park district, and then the park district is going to be in the same situation that we're in, and they're going to have a decision to make. Do they want to give up, I mean, you look at the per acre price, it's probably a $7 million parcel of land they have, which is a significant amount of money for them. Do they want to give that up? Are they going to continue to partner with the community, or are they going to sell for $7 million bucks? So I'm surprised they're not playing it more cautiously. I mean, they should be very quiet and wait till this plays out. If they're looking out ahead.
Maybe they said, hey, the only way to stop him is for all, I mean, Village of Willow Springs took a risk, right, in being so vocal of, we're never gonna let this happen. If there's possibilities, some likelihood
have some
it
exposure
would
there, right?
happen. And then Todd Davis and I knew him growing up, I realized when I saw him.
Todd Davis?
Yeah. Same thing, right? Like, maybe they banded together to say, hey, we all need to show up, we need to fill those seats, and have these signs in the audience to stop this. But it could all turn on them.
Without
Is there a
any
reason to
experience
talk
in
to
this,
the-
I feel like they are absolutely terrified. Because they know once it gets past this hurdle, it goes to,
No.
Or they're in over their skis and haven't had sound legal counsel advise them. I don't know. I mean, they might be undereducated on the process or naive about it. I don't know.
It feels like a meeting with them will become a negotiation process. And ultimately, that may have to happen at some point. Because if they are adamant, they're not going to change any of that. Well, we're not going to get $55 million for that property, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what happens if they stick to that. Now, where does that landing spot? Are they going to give something? Are we going to give something? At any rate, we're not going to get $55 million in that property at that point, and we still may not. I mean, the reality is that could be true. And so, to me, if we meet with them, it just feels like a negotiation, and I don't know that that's necessarily where we want to go right now. That's just my thought.
Okay, well, I'm inclined to leave it alone unless they come back at us and request another meeting or request a follow-up to that initial, the initial email that you responded to.
yeah,
Is
if
okay
they
with that?
reach out, and they very well may tomorrow. I mean, if they
Getting a lot of
do, I'll
head
get that
nodding.
out to the board and we can have a.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right, let's leave it at that then. Okay, so Dawn, everyone is gonna, we're gonna wait to see if they follow up after our last communication, so.
I think it's like kind of 6 on one side, half a dozen on the other with it,
Yeah,
It
I
is
know.
different.
I don't want it to be more
Okay.
damaging in the end. Either to
Right.
your point, what's that agenda look like?
Yeah.
All
And
right.
obviously same strategy with the school district and the parks district, right? We just keep it how
But
we've
if
had
they
it.
reach out
If
to
they
you,
reach
though,
out,
that's a different
yeah.
story.
Just let us
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
Yeah.
I will.
okay?
Yep.
And then everyone
For
can
sure.
weigh in on that.
Sure.
Okay, because that's a decision that affects all of us. Okay, is there anything else that you had pressing? You had some things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is what is our next step? Do we want to send this out? Like, our thought was Brian and Eris and I would meet tomorrow and review the communication that was sent to the initial prospective buyer list. We would re-up that, send that out again to everyone. There's a couple thoughts here, or there are a couple ideas. Let's say we get that out to the prospective buyers on Wednesday, which would be the 25th, right? 25th.
Yeah.
Do we set an arbitrary deadline sometime in the future that says, if you're interested, communicate your interest by this date?
Do we need a board vote for something like that?
You don't, no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of a request as opposed to a hard date.
I was just gonna say, could we make it flexible so we don't trap ourselves into missing out on a guy who's a day late with
Yeah,
$5 million more?
absolutely. I think
To
we
be
just want
encouraging,
to
but-
not have it linger, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So when you get in touch with Hiffman and they reach out to their people, maybe we make it the day before the next board meeting, next month. So you have essentially 4 weeks for them to get back to you, at least, and they may
the
come back
next
and say, hey, our guys aren't interested anymore, or they may say, we need a little more time, but at least we have more information.
I feel like there's 2 deadlines to this. I think there's one, we kind of talked about putting together some time frame for them to at least let us know that they're interested. That's number one, because you have the $55 million threshold, you have to meet that. So are you interested? And maybe that's 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know what it is.
Okay.
And then there's another timeline after that with a deadline that says, give us your proposal with your, whatever you think the terms and conditions should be, and then we evaluate from there. I don't know if anyone else.
And the earnest money.
Yeah,
Like-
right. You know, and
That's kinda what we talked about last
We'd ask for
week.
letters of intent, and then once we get them, we would start negotiating, and then the highest one, it would go to a contract. Once it's approved, then the earnest money is provided.
Right.
But I like your approach, Brian. I think that makes sense.
Could you make it a soft approach, like we'd like to
Yeah.
have all of them in by this date? Like we would like to,
Yeah.
so that if someone didn't get them in,
Sure.
it's not a hard deadline.
Sure, and look, there's nothing to say that in a negotiation process, we get to the 11th hour and someone comes in and says, hey, I have more money than they do.
Right.
Who knows?
We'd like to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that
we can
would,
Somebody
do
other
that.
than Bridge.
that would make it, what?
I said somebody other than Bridge.
So what would we require, that first deadline we're talking about, what would we require? A letter of intent that has a price on it? Probably?
I don't even know if it's a
LOIs
letter of
do.
intent that has a
Otherwise,
pri-
kind of like.
Usually
this-
they do, right? And yeah.
I don't know, would you ask for a price at that time, or we
Or
just say?
just the
Soft
expression of
and
interest.
Just,
I
we,
guess.
we want an interest, and then give them some time to kind of get together and do some due diligence on,
And that first time frame's short, though. Like, I mean, if you've got a list of 15 people, it'd be helpful to know that 9 of them, like, aren't gonna even take a peek, right?
Right.
So you can hone,
So what do you give that,
I mean,
2
like,
weeks?
I-
A week?
Well, yeah, that's,
2 weeks?
when we were talking about this yesterday, it was like, do we set that first deadline at Friday, February 3rd, which is a week from Friday? And that would be just, they would have
Week
to
and a
let
half.
us know if
Do
they're
you wanna
interested.
Do you want to
Well, not
participate?
have to. Right. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you have
that-
interest in
It would be a
participating?
soft deadline.
Okay,
to-
that's, I just want to
Yeah.
make,
and even that feels too short.
Yeah.
It feels short to me,
I
too.
feel like,
It's a week from Friday.
yeah, I
We
feel
don't really
like,
care. I
That's-
mean, we do,
But
but we
these-
don't
Yeah.
need it.
these people have
2
already,
weeks.
generally, they've already heard from us once, a month,
Unless there's any
month
new
and a half ago.
players.
Yeah.
yes,
Are there any
there are
players?
some
New?
new players.
New.
Okay.
And we
Yeah.
did receive some communication that said, look, the last timeline of, what do we have, like 3 weeks?
Yeah, it wasn't
Was
long
too
enough.
short for them. And now, that probably also took into consideration the fact that the holidays were
Yeah.
there
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
were gone,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but
Why
I
don't you
guess
give
I
them
want to
2
give
weeks?
us the best shot at it too, and not just simply say,
Yeah.
here's the deadline, we end up only with, and we could still, anyway, we end up only with maybe Bridge, or maybe not even, who knows? And everyone else comes back and says, well, you guys didn't give us enough time to even
Right.
do some work on this, to
Right.
say,
Right.
yeah, this is what we want to do, or no, we don't.
Can you
So,
find
February-
out from
February
like the
10th
first
is-
couple people, you talk to, like, will they give you a feeling or a flavor of like, no, you're out of your mind if you think we can get back in 3 weeks with all this information, like, we need more time.
Well, it's just an intent, right? It's
yeah,
just,
I mean, we could certainly call that, so the way we've communicated with them is via email.
Okay,
So
And
we've
that's-
sent everything out, you know,
Okay.
because it's in writing that way and that sort of thing.
got it.
I don't know, Eris, do you have any other insight on that in terms of the
I mean,
timeline?
I think giving them a little more time, a lot of them, I think they're gonna say, you know what, we can't do it. You'll know within 24 hours.
Yeah.
55 million is going to be the
We're
problem.
not interested. And
Yeah.
then you do have a few that at least initially were interested, but, so, you know, one thing we learned is that these folks don't read these documents when you
Right.
give them to them.
Right.
That was really surprising that they were not reading this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think we can cull the herd pretty quickly. If there are, in your example, 6 that are interested, then we say, hey, in 3 weeks, we'd like a letter of intent. And
Yeah.
if they all get back to us and say, hey, we have to go before our investment committee, no way we can do it in 3 weeks, then we give them more time,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's
Deal.
well articulated.
is February 10th more reasonable, like around there, like we'd be looking? That
Yeah,
gives
that's
them-
3 weeks.
That'd be- Yeah.
That's 2 weeks from Friday.
Right, 2 weeks
Yeah.
from Friday.
Right, and we're talking about potentially reaching out to them this Wednesday, the 25th, so it's a little more
Right,
than that.
right.
Like, again, just intent to participate.
Non-binding.
Let us know.
Yeah, and I think you ask them, is that enough time? And
Yeah.
if they're like, oh yeah, we can let you know generally
Right.
that we're moderately
Right.
interested.
Okay.
But if everyone's like, that's not enough time, then I think we have to be flexible.
Okay,
Right.
Good.
let's say the 10th and then ask if that's enough time for them to
Yeah.
make that decision.
Or
Okay.
just
So we
Are
leave
you
it with that,
interested?
we don't need to put any other, like, future deadlines around
I don't
when the
think I
earnest money,
would,
just
yeah.
keep it
Yeah,
February
yeah,
10th.
right,
and
agree.
Sorry, February 10th is interest or your bid?
Interest.
Interest.
At that sale price.
Okay, but when do we want the bids then? Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's
then
kinda
we
what I
circle
was
back when
thinking.
you get those, like maybe on like that Monday, the 13th or whatever it would be.
Then we would have to set a future date around when the bid and the earnest money would be due.
Based on who's
I'm just,
interested.
yeah.
Which
I'm
you're
sorry,
probably
struggling
So,
with it being
Julie,
segmented.
it's gonna push that out to
March.
Yeah, no, it's
When
gonna
is
be
your
a new.
next board meeting? Like a regular?
The
February
6th
20th.
is our
February-
No, I'm sorry,
regular
February
action.
21st. Tuesday
21st.
night, February 21st.
It's after
I
President's Day.
just feel like, and sorry, too many feelings. I feel like this is a manageable population. An email distribution for the initial, hey, this didn't go through the sealed bid process and it's open again. We'd like to know as soon as possible whether you're interested or not. If possible, by 3 weeks seems way long to me, just
Okay.
for me, since they've heard about it before. But I certainly don't want to box
Yeah.
anybody out. I feel like step one is easy, like,
Yeah.
yeah, we might take a look
Low-hanging
at it,
fruit,
okay.
sure.
And then I feel like it's more of a phone call situation rather than an email situation, to build a relationship with someone to find out,
Okay.
like, hey, we're somewhat flexible on deadlines, but we've got some other extenuating circumstances, and this is in a public setting, so, and then get some intel. Like, I think we could learn more from them rather than us trying to set a date that might prove in the end to like span over a new board.
Too long.
If it's a
Yeah. I
soft
mean, getting
deadline.
LOIs by the next board meeting would be great to, say you said, we really like to get your letter of intent if possible by February 21st, then there'd be something for you guys to chew on prior to the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the
Well, I
March
think
meeting.
the 10th covers that, right? I mean, if we get them by the 10th of February. I
That was
think
the
we're-
interest.
Yeah.
No,
That's what I
That's
think
what
he's
Eric
using
said,
the
the
same
letter.
Letter of
LOI,
intent.
letter
Oh,
of
the
intent.
interest
I thought
is
you
now
meant
the
letter of
thing, too.
intent. I thought you were saying the letter of
I
intent, not
mean,
the interest.
But are we losing any time? I
Yeah.
still think we might be losing time.
I think the interest is going to be a little more casual, like what Julie's saying. I think we want to give them, if we can get a letter of intent, and it's obviously not set in stone, but if
Okay.
possible, by your next regular board meeting, because let's say there really is interest, you guys would need to think about a special board meeting to get a contract approved, possibly,
To be clear, with a letter of intent, yeah, I just asked this, I think, have the price in it.
We would need to.
Okay,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
he's saying
Consider.
something much faster than I think what we
Yeah, I
were all
think
just
that's
describing.
that's been the
Okay.
confusing part.
I was thinking you were just going to say interest. Like, hey, we're going to get you a letter of intent. We'd be interested in it.
I think if we're
Let's
just
circle back.
asking for interest, the deadline can be much shorter. If we're asking for a number, then I think we need to build in a little more time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Maybe we need to
Yes,
put two
but I don't think we
deadlines
need
out
8
then.
weeks, I think we need,
I think we've
For the
been
next
in
board
talking about
meeting.
this too long. I think we're all confused.
with talking to someone about, like, if you can't come up with it, I mean, they can come up with an estimate if they are interested, and if we let it go too long, we're at risk of, well, the Fed's gonna raise rates again, and they are, guaranteed
Yeah.
are, right? So there's another bad fact, it's just whether that's softened or not, and if rates are intended to go up throughout the course of this year, not coming down at the end of this year, not until next year, like, we don't always have the luxury of time, but we're
Yeah.
trying to balance having more
Trying
than
to
one bid
balance,
or
I know.
two
keeping
bids.
them-
Being
So
realistic
I
and
think
keeping the
we
right players
should
interested.
acknowledge, and I'm not trying to sound like an expert, try to acknowledge that we don't know how fast people can move or not, except that we heard last time was too quick and maybe it was due to the holidays. So, long way of saying, let's try to encourage people to let us know.
So
Quickly?
if they send a letter of intent, it would include their bid, what they think the terms and conditions should
Exactly.
be,
Yep.
and would it include the earnest money?
It would not, because
Okay.
normally earnest money is only paid like within
After-
5 or 10 days after you have a contract.
Okay.
So the letter of intent would say what they think the earnest money ought to be. We said it should be $500,000. They may say it should only
Okay.
be $200,000. That would be a term that would be negotiated
Mm-hmm.
with a prospective buyer. But the earnest money will only be delivered after you guys approve the contract, if we get to that point.
So I guess I'm still thinking that realistically to ask for it sooner than the 10th.
And
doesn't
what's the
seem-
it? Sorry.
To ask for the letter of intent, if it's gonna
Oh, yeah, no,
outline
it's
their
something-
terms and conditions and stuff like that. If all that stuff has to come in.
No, not by the time.
Ahead of the board
I
meeting.
think
You
that's.
just need them by the 21st, so, or,
Okay.
whatever that Monday is.
The 13th?
Is the 21st a Monday?
20th.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a
So-
Tuesday.
Our meeting's on a Tuesday because of the holidays.
But we have to, I feel like we have to build in time, right? Like, it would have to be the week before that.
How about the Friday before that
The
board
17th.
meeting?
Because it's in the tent, we're talking
Wait.
about them in closed session
Hold up a second here.
versus
Hold
open.
up.
Oh, is that what you're
So
thinking? Yeah.
February
Is that what you're
6th is
thinking?
committee of the whole.
Mhm.
And then the 13th, we have nothing that week, and then the 21st, we
21st.
come in for the regular action meeting that
So
follows.
you're saying it would be helpful to have them all so that we could talk about it in closed session on the
Right.
21st.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not open
yeah.
session.
Not,
No,
And
no,
that's a
no,
huge
no.
difference.
This is a closed
No, no,
session
no.
discussion.
But-
There should be nothing
But
talked
if
about
that's
in
a
open.
closed
So if we
discussion,
can
we're
get a letter
still
of
not,
intent, if
would we
possible,
be
by the
making a vote
17th
on the
or that
21st?
Friday.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
well,
What?
no.
no, I don't think there'd be a
No,
vote on
we
the
would not be
21st.
there would not
No,
be.
no, no, no.
No
These-
vote on the 21st, just a
No,
discussion.
all I'm
Okay,
suggesting
so the
is
vote
let
won't happen
perfect
till
case,
March.
you end up with a few letters of intent.
Yeah.
You have closed session either before or
Mhm.
after the regular meeting on the 22nd, and just talk through them and say, hey, this
Okay.
is from Joe's Auto Shop. I don't think
Right.
they can make this happen. This
Okay.
is from Duke or Centerpoint or some
Sure.
big name,
Sure.
and their terms sound pretty good to us.
Okay,
We know they
Right.
can do it.
All right.
You know?
And then if we think we're getting excited and time is of the essence and we better continue the process for whatever reason, we can always call a special
Absolutely.
meeting
Yes.
for March
Yes.
Yep.
10th,
Yeah.
making up a date.
Right.
Yeah.
Where the agenda item would be to approve.
You need 48 hours notice for a special
Okay.
meeting, that's it.
Yep.
Yeah,
So we
Okay.
can do a casual ask of, we're shooting for February 17th,
yes.
letter of intent, if that gives you enough time. Does that work for you
Yeah,
guys?
and I think Brian can even follow up with these folks with,
February 17th.
hey, we haven't heard from you, or Friday the
Mhm.
17th is coming up, let us know. If you've talked to these guys, Brian, a phone call too, you know?
Yeah, what I'd like to do, Iris, is maybe you and I talk about what we might want to put out, like in an email.
Exactly.
We can
We'll draft
that.
it together.
And then
Yeah.
what we can do is we can put something in there that says, look, this is,
I think so.
I'm paraphrasing here, this is sort of a soft deadline. If you need some more time, please let us know.
Exactly.
Great.
And we
Yes,
can kind of work
yes,
with
yes,
that.
yes, I like
Good.
that.
And
Because there'll still be a negotiation. Look, somebody could come in with $60 million, but we don't like their terms and conditions.
Exactly.
I mean, that can happen too.
Yeah, and the highest number is not always gonna be the winning bidder.
Right.
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 All right, cool.
Okay.
Okay, I
Anything
have,
you've ever-
yeah,
no?
deadline to submit the letter of intent by February 17th, and that letter has to include the interest, the price, and terms and conditions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But wouldn't the letter of intent be the interest?
yeah.
Yeah.
So interest, price, and, what was the third?
I would just say
Oh, in
interest.
terms and conditions, yeah, yeah.
I would just say
Yeah,
terms and
yeah.
conditions. I wouldn't even say interest.
Price and
because
terms
they're
and- yeah.
submitting it.
We know that,
It's
yeah,
their
they're
interest.
already interested.
Okay.
Your price and terms and conditions
Yep.
submitted by the by the 17th.
Okay.
Okay, and there's nothing else you have left to ask? For now.
I don't think so.
Okay, guys.
I think,
we're
yeah,
good?
communication
We're
about
feeling good?
tomorrow.
Communication about tomorrow's going out. You know it. Okay, we're good. Okay.
No,
All right. It is 11:06. Is there a motion to adjourn closed session and move back into open session?
So moved. Second.
Did you get that? Got Allison.
Hold on.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, open the door and then we can motion to adjourn. Thanks, Brian.
Are you going back to the
Alright.
auditorium,
No,
or are you
we're-
staying here?
We stay
We
here.
gotta
Oh,
be
you stay
open?
here,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Right
Okay.
back.
Okay, time is 11:07. Can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Hey, thank y'all. Thanks, Dawn.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
trip.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
see ya, bye.
All right.